Now, let us discuss what we have covered till now. If you look at the ontological questions, I mean we started with ontological questions, then we moved on to what ought to be, okay, in the form of the social institution of science, I mean the ethos of modern science by Merton, namely universalism, communism, disinterestedness and organized skepticism. Okay. If you look at them and then the way we move to the methods of science and the kind of methods of science that we have discussed, I mean inductivism, hypothesism and positivism. Okay. Now, from now onward we will start discussing the way post-positivistic terms within STS, within philosophy of science, history of science, sociology of science. Okay. Then who are the prominent players, who are the prominent authors, okay, in the post-positivistic terms? There Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn and also Paul Feyerabend. Lakatos is there and many others are there, but for the sake of this course, the way we have designed, we will discuss Popper, Kuhn and Feyerabend. Okay. In fact, if you look at the controversies between Popper and Kuhn, you will find that perhaps the debates between Popper and Kuhn are the most significant ones in the 20th century philosophy of science. In fact, these two paradigms of thought, they dominated not only the later half of the 20th century, but even in 2017. Okay? The debate is not over even after that demise. Okay? And they were excellent historians and philosophers of science who could rule the world in terms of the methods of science, the perspectives on science and so on. Okay. If I say Darwin, Charles Darwin provided a paradigm in the biological sciences, Freud provided a paradigm in psychology, okay. Marx provided a paradigm in the humanities and social sciences, then Popper and Kuhn provided two paradigms of thought in science, technology and society studies, which are very dominant even today. And the way they tried to defend their methods and the way their followers also tried to defend their methods. Okay? And the critics too, both Popper and Kuhn will find that even their critics, they have not yet been able to create walls so that they can be ignored even today. Okay. What we have done, I mean, if you look at in the ontological questions, we started with technology, science and the relationship between science and technology, and the relationship between technology and science on the one hand and society on the other. Then we provided three models or three perspectives on STS, okay, namely the linear model, the interactionist model and the embedded model. The linear model suggests that science leads to the development of technology, technology leads to the development of society, whereas the interactionist model suggests that no, society also leads to the development of technology and science as well. But there is a similarity between these two models that we have already discussed, that both these models they treat science, technology and society as separate entities, whereas the embedded model suggests that the relationship between science and technology is symbiotic in nature. Both science and technology as two forces of production, they are not autonomous activities, they are not isolated activities, rather they are very much a part of social formation. Okay. Thereby, we challenge the question, the idea of technological determinism, that technology determines our economy, culture and polity, or changes occur because of technological interventions and so on. Okay. Now, if you look at the kind of transition that we have made because of changes in the modes of production, because of the rise in our intellectual and political consciousness and so on, if you look at this, then what the kind of changes that we see today, I mean the cognitive and political changes, they have significant implications on the way we view suppose nature, culture, environment, health, agriculture and so on. And from these ontological questions, we came to some normative questions in the form of normative structure of science, in the form of institutional imperatives of science, in the form of ethos of modern science by Robert Merton. I mean ethos of science, I mean effectively toned complex of values and norms which is held to be binding on the man of science, and these norms are expressed in the form of prescriptions, proscriptions, preferences and permissions. We have discussed this. I mean prescriptions, when I say, I mean a broad normative framework. Proscriptions are norms which are legally bound. Preferences are motivational norms, motivational ideals, motivational values. Whereas permissions, they come under the institutional norms, institutional values, institutional ideals, I mean institutional mandates on the whole. And from there on, what we try to do, that we try to delineate 4 institutional imperatives, 4 ethos of modern science, namely universalism, communism, disinterestedness and organized skepticism. When we discussed Mertonian ethos of science, we mainly focused on the goals of what must be, what should be the objectives of science. That is why I said normative or prescriptive framework, prescriptive structure of science. Okay. Now, from the ontological questions to the normative questions, now we are coming to the methodological questions. Okay. Now, the methodological questions that we see today, they are very important. But perhaps among those 4 ethos of modern science, that is why I said earlier that universalism, communism and disinterestedness, they refer to the goals of science, whereas organized skepticism refers to not only the goal of science, but also a methodological rationale which is very important in the context of science and its practitioners. Okay. I mean you need to temporarily suspend your judgment, you need to keep on postponing your judgment until and unless all facts are at hand. And that is why science is distinct from all areas of human activity or creativity, because it possesses a method unique to it. That is methodological, as we have already discussed in the context of the central tenets of positivism. Within the methods of science, we have discussed inductivism, hypothesism and positivism. As we discussed that since from 17th century till 19th century, I mean these 3 centuries, okay, were dominated by schools of inductivism as well as hypothesism. I mean that is it heralds the birth of modern philosophy of science. Okay. When you look at this, okay, and positivism is a 20th century phenomenon. Okay. When we look at this, okay, as we have already discussed that no, inductivism is rooted in empiricism. Again, empiricism is rooted in experience. Okay, it always starts. I mean, science must start with observation. Science must remain at the level of observation. Science must end with observation. Whereas in the hypothesist schema, science starts only when we go beyond observation, on account of which science becomes trans-observational in nature in the context of hypothesist schema. Okay? And both, why it is trans-observational in the hypothesist schema? Because hypothesists maintain, I mean including René Descartes, who said cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, I doubt therefore I am. Okay? I mean my existence, my own self is very much contingent upon the way I think, the way I question, the way I doubt. It is important to understand. Okay? Science always starts with a hypothesis for Descartes, for Cartesian philosophy of science. But in the inductivist schema, in the Baconian model of science, that no, science always starts with observation. Okay? And these controversies remained for a long period of time, and today also people all even scientists themselves they argue it. Either in favor of either of these perspectives. Okay? No doubt about that. Okay? And then what we discussed, that how inductivism looked at certainty and breadth as the hallmarks of scientific knowledge, and hypothesists looked upon novelty and depth as the hallmarks of scientific knowledge. And I mean when we say this, okay, then it becomes I mean hypothesists, why they said that no, it must be novelty and depth, it must be new and it must have deeper entities and processes, precisely because for them no observation is presuppositionless. We will come to this, we have already discussed this, but again and again we have to come back to this point. It is very important to understand this. Okay? Suppose if I say, as I told you earlier, that suppose this space, in this space we also have electron, proton, but we simply cannot observe this. We deploy our rational understanding, our rationality to make these, to explain the existence of proton and electron even in this space, but we just cannot observe it. Okay? Because hypothesism is grounded in rationalism, rationalism is based on reasoning capacity in this sense. And then what we tried to do is that from this we came to a stage where all methodological tenates, characteristics were organized by the proponents of positivism. Whenever I come to, whenever we try to discuss positivism, positivism must be discussed in a certain context of the transition from theological stage to metaphysical stage to positivistic or scientific stage. Theological stage suggests that changes occur because of the changes in the supernatural forces. Whereas, I mean you attribute any kind of change to changes in the supernatural forces, you changes in terms of not this worldly phenomena, but the other worldly phenomena, okay, which science does not believe in. And metaphysical stage suggests that no, changes do not occur because of the changes of supernatural forces, but changes occur because of natural interventions. Nature always dictates us to make changes. Whereas positivistic or scientific stage suggests that no, it is not simply nature dictates, but human action, human beings, social actors, okay, they determine what kind of nature we are going to have. Okay? That is why we discussed how there is a transition from faculty of contemplation to faculty of control. Okay? And we not only contemplate on nature, but also control nature. That is it. Okay? Then we discussed central tenets of positivism, that when I said if you look at this central tenets of positivism, that methodological, okay, that we said that that science is distinct from all areas of human activity or creativity, okay, because it possesses a method unique to it. Why positivism? Under what circumstances positivism emerged? Positivism stood squarely against the theology as well as metaphysics. Positivism emerged in the context of the Industrial Revolution, in the context of the debates on modernity, critical thinking, reasoning capacity, and the capacity to interrogate, the capacity to pose questions. If I cannot question, then that is not the motto of science. The motto of science lies in the way I must be able to raise questions, pose questions. This is very important. Okay? Then positivists even positivism emerged in the context of challenging the dominance of religion and especially in the context of the dominance of church in Europe. Perhaps in India we have not yet come to a point of this, okay? That way, but it does not imply that there is only one form of enlightenment. We see multiple modernities, alternative modernities, that is a different story altogether. I mean, that is a different discourse altogether. We will see. In the context of post-structuralism, post-modernism, we will see. We always witness that how there is no the enlightenment, the modernity. Rather, we may say that the kind of enlightenment Europe witnessed, maybe Latin America, Africa, Asia, they will witness different sorts of enlightenment. Okay? But the kind of instrumental rationality, goal oriented, purpose oriented social action, objective oriented social action that we try to understand, okay, and positivism provided us with this kind of a framework. Then the second tenet that we discussed, that is methodological monism, okay, that there is only one method common to all sciences irrespective of their subject matter. Then we discussed inductivism, that the method of science is the method of induction. Then we discussed systematic verifiability, that the hallmark of science consists in the fact that all scientific statements must be systematically verifiable. Then we discussed how observations are or can be shown pure, okay, in the sense that observations are theory independent in the positivistic schema. Okay. And then we said observations, as observations are pure, they cannot be doubted, they are indubitable in nature. There is always a one way relationship, there is always a unilateral relationship between observation and theory, that observation leads to theory formation, whereas theory formation does not lead to observation in the positivistic schema. Then we discussed fact value dichotomy, that facts do not have any value content, I mean they are value neutral, whereas values do not have any factual content. There is always a dichotomy between fact and value. If I say, as I gave you the example, that this is a laptop, this is a fact. If I say this laptop looks beautiful or ugly, then I add value to it. Okay? That is why this, whether the laptop looks beautiful or ugly does not come under the purview of science. Okay? It is very important to understand this phenomenon. Okay? Science always believes in facts, whether this is a laptop, this is a fact, but no value commitments. That is why science as the paradigm, as the paradigm, as one of the paradigms of knowledge production, does not adhere to any value commitments. Okay? That is why, and then all explanation must involve deduction, as we have discussed. I mean, now in a nutshell, we will see, and then we discussed how observations presuppose theory and the counterpoints to this kind of proposition which positivists made, that how observations do not, I mean observations presuppose theory as well as the counter arguments to observations presuppose theory. Okay? I mean both, observations presuppose theory as it was propagated by the positivists, then we will see how it was, we also discussed how it was, a critique was brought about. Okay? There we discussed how no observation is presuppositionless, observation is always theory laden, precisely because whatever observations that we make, okay, it always involves some amount of, some element of selection. On what basis we select? Selection is based on cultural relevance, as Weber said it. When I say selection is based on cultural relevance, and then my observations are not independent, my observations are not pure. They are always backed by certain cultural artifacts, certain ideology, certain theories. Then then we have also discussed how observation does not provide us with a language or idiom for expression, whereas theory provides us with a language or an idiom for expression. That is on account of which we discussed how observations or no observation is presuppositionless, okay, as positivists thought. This argument against positivism was bolstered by, was strengthened by Karl Popper. Okay. Before starting the discussion on Popperian methodology, okay, let us quickly see what are the steps that inductivism, hypothesism and positivism they follow. Okay. Inductivism starts with observational data. Inductivism suggests that science must start with observational data without recourse to any theory. Observational data, this is very important. Step 2, we must provide a tentative generalization which requires verification, and then we come to we tend to formulate a law. That is the third step. If I say observational data, okay, I tend to observe. I will say that no, Socrates is mortal. Then what kind of tentative generalization I will provide? I will say Socrates is a man, which requires verification. Socrates may be a sheep, may be a tiger, I do not know. That is why that Socrates is a man has to be verified. This is very important. If I can verify that, then I tend to formulate that law. Okay. In the context of that, these are the three steps. In hypothesism, hypothesists argue that science always starts with a hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? It is a tentative solution to a problem or hunch, if you look at this. Okay? And if it is a tentative solution to a problem or hunch, what we generally do? We generally tend to test our hypothesis, whether it is right or wrong. In research, what we notice in general, that most of the scholars, they try to prove or disprove their hypothesis, which is ethically wrong. You should test your hypothesis whether it is right or wrong. Hypothesis should be tested right or wrong. Hypothesis should not be proved or disproved. If one is die-hard in proving or disproving his or her hypothesis, then it hinders the tradition of cumulative knowledge production. If you are die-hard in proving or disproving your hypothesis, then you will try to manipulate the data, which is not advisable, which is scorned, which is not ethically correct to do in research. And once a hypothesis is tested right or wrong, if it is a wrong one, then we must reject it. Okay? We must reject the hypothesis, and if the hypothesis is tested right, then we must accept this in the hypothesist schema. In the positivistic schema, science must start with observation. Then from that observation, the second step depicts how we can arrive at a set of laws. The third step, I mean a set of laws in the form of premise number 1. Okay. The third step suggests a set of statements describing initial conditions, you can see here. Okay. I mean the premise number 1, a set of laws, premise number 2, a set of statements describing initial conditions, and the kind of conclusion that we make, that a statement, I mean that this is the explanation in the form of a statement describing the phenomenon to be explained. That is why we say all men are mortal. Okay? And this positivistic construal of science, okay, was most systematically attacked by Karl Popper, okay, who was very much influenced by Max Weber, okay, I mean the Vienna school. We also say Verstehen school of thought. Verstehen means understanding, okay, in German language. This such positivistic construal of science was most systematically attacked by Karl Popper, okay? Karl Popper, who provided an alternative image of science. His theory of scientific method has won a lot of admirers both in science as well as philosophy. Okay? That is why I said earlier that the science is natural philosophy, and the way philosophy I mean ethics, when ethics was combined with natural philosophy, I mean that epistemology, then it became philosophy of science. That is why I mean science and philosophy, I mean natural philosophy and moral philosophy. Okay. Whereas positivists tried to work out a sophisticated version of the view called inductivism, Popper sought to resurrect its rival, namely hypothesism. In what follows, we shall consider Popper's views on the nature of sciences along with his attack on the positivistic theory of science. It might be pointed out that for Popper, the value of the philosophical interest in scientific knowledge lies in its ability to shed light on the central question of philosophy. Then what is the central question of philosophy for Popper? Now, the problem of cosmology. What is the problem of cosmology? Now, the problem of understanding the world, including ourselves and our knowledge of the world as part of the world. I mean, if we want to understand the world, we cannot be isolated phenomena. We must be a part of the world to understand the world and the changes which occur there. In studying Popper's contribution to our understanding of science, one must bear in mind his general philosophical concerns, which alone set in motion, guide and lend deep significance to his painstaking work on the nature of science. Okay? This is an important question. Then for Popper, what is the starting point of philosophy? What is the problem of philosophy? No, the problem of cosmology. Okay? And such philosophical inquiry into the nature of scientific method, according to Popper, must confine itself to the manner in which scientific theories are evaluated. When I say evaluated, I mean scientific theories are accepted or rejected. And Popper refuses to consider as legitimate the inquiry into the way in which these theories are arrived at. Therefore, according to Popper, philosophy of science must first confine itself to the context of justification and refuse to say anything about the context of discovery. What is this? Context of justification and context of discovery. We will see. Popper considers the creative process in and through which scientific ideas are generated to be unamendable to any rational explanation. This is the first one. Then how did we start? The problem of cosmology, I mean the central question of philosophy, that is the problem of cosmology, and the first one he referred to that philosophy of science must confine itself to the context of justification, not the context of discovery initially. Okay. Secondly, what kind of an adequate philosophy of science that must provide a criterion of demarcation between science and non-science. You see, inductivists, hypothesists, as well as positivists, okay, they always try to make a demarcation between science and non-science. Popper also did not deviate from that. Like positivists, Popper is convinced of the uniqueness and supremacy of science in the overall scheme of our activities aimed at knowledge acquisition. What are these methods? We have already discussed, if you can remember. If you can slightly recall what we have discussed about the methods, I mean technical methods in the context of ethos of science, that empirically confirmed and logically consistent statements of regularities. Okay? Perhaps for this reason, knowledge seeking, I mean perhaps for this reason, science is unique and supreme as compared to other spheres of human activity or creativity. Okay? Hence, both positivists and Popper felt the need to demarcate science from the rest of knowledge acquisition activities. Okay? That is why positivists who were inductivists maintained that the hallmark of scientific theory lies in their systematic verifiability. We will come to this point a little while later. Why I said that there is a need to demarcate science from the rest of knowledge acquisition activities. Other spheres of human activity or creativity other forms of knowledge acquisition activities, we may see that how they believe in or they believe in the observable facts. Science also believes in observable facts, but the theological stage, the metaphysical stage, the proponents of theological stage, the proponents of metaphysics, they did not, the proponents of theology as well as the proponents of metaphysics, they did not believe in the verifiable facts. Whereas science not only starts with observable facts, but also verifiable facts. Whatever I observe, I must be able to verify. Okay? And positivists argued in that favor. Okay? In this context, Popper deviated from verification. We will come to this point a little while later. If I put a stick in a glass of water, the stick looks bent, but actually the stick is not bent. It only appears to be bent, but actually it is not bent. Okay? That is why seeing is believing, that whatever I see I must believe in that. It has its own limits. Okay? As positivists argued that no, whatever we see we must believe in that. And positivists argued that that seeing is believing, okay, but there is a limitation, that whatever I see I may not believe because of why the stick looks bent, because of the physical properties of glass, because of the reflection, so many other things. Okay? I mean image. If I say that I have seen a ghost, if I say this, then I am just observing something. I may observe something, but it is beyond the principle of verification. If I am observing, I am seeing a ghost, then others must also be able to see ghost. It must be verified. Okay? Maybe, as I provided some kind of explanation why the stick in a glass of water looks bent, I may say that maybe the psychological state of mind forced me to see that kind of a phenomenon in the it is called ghost. Okay? That is why there is a need to demarcate science from non-science in this sense. And positivists always argued that the hallmark of scientific theories lies in their systematic verifiability. You have to keep on verifying. If I say all swans are white, then I must be able to verify all swans. Okay, that is what hypothesists challenged inductivists, as we have discussed earlier, that are you sure that you have seen all swans in the world to come to a conclusion that all swans are white? You cannot keep on accumulating your observations, there is always a limitation. I mean, there is always a limiting condition under which we say all swans are white or all crows are black. That is a limitation. Then that is why positivists who were inductivists maintained that the hallmark of scientific theories lies in their systematic verifiability. And Popper comes to the main point here, that Popper replaces verifiability by falsifiability. According to Popper, if for positivists the hallmark of scientific theories lies in their systematic verifiability, according to Popper, the hallmark of scientific theories lies in their systematic falsifiability. Popper maintains that what distinguishes science from the rest of our knowledge is not that scientific statements are verifiable, but they are falsifiable. The scientific theories are falsifiable according to Popper in the sense that they transparently state what circumstances lead to their rejection. Under what circumstances our scientific theories are accepted, and under that was the job that was the view of inductivists, hypothesists and positivists. Whereas for Popper, under what circumstances our scientific theories are rejected, refuted. That is important. If we keep on testing if we keep on accumulating our observations to support our theory, then there is no progression of science. We must keep on accumulating our observations, our observational statements, our experiences, our circumstances, our conditions, so that an existing theory may be put to test, may be rejected in its entirety, and thereby science can make progress. If I keep on collecting data to support a theory, then there is actually no progression of knowledge for Popper. For Popper, science, or we tend to go ahead with the furtherance of knowledge only when we try to challenge the hitherto existing theories. Then that is why it is important for Popper to make a distinction between science and non-science, okay? And the distinction is preferred, and what makes this kind of distinction possible, not just because they are verifiable, but because scientific statements are falsifiable, and the scientific theories are falsifiable in the sense that they transparently state what circumstances lead to their rejection. Whenever scientific theories are advanced, it is also stated under what conditions they try to be, they turn out to be false, so that we try to obtain those conditions in order to falsify our claims. It is very important to create conditions to support your scientific claim. Anybody does this. I mean, almost most of the scientists, they do that. But a very few scientists, those who have practitioners, a critical mind, they will say that no, let us falsify our claims and let us create those conditions which can falsify our scientific claims. Okay? This is very important, and in fact there is a progression of knowledge because of this. And an ideal scientific statement is constituted in such a way that its terms, instead of helping to survive, enable it to readily accept the risk of being falsified. In other words, a model of scientific statement should readily yield test implications which we deduce in order to refute it. Refutation is very important. A statement, however plausible and perfectly consistent with what we observe, is not scientific unless we can easily deduce testable consequences from it. It is in this connection Popper attacks Marxism as being pseudo-scientific. In fact, if you read The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper, Popper challenged three historical personalities, namely Darwin, Marx and Freud, okay? Precisely because the way you tend to criticize, or the way you try to bring about a critique to Darwin, Marx or Freud, okay, the proponents of Darwin, Marx and Freud, they create walls so that you cannot bring about a critique, you cannot foreground a critique, which hinders the tradition of cumulative knowledge. In this sense we are using. Okay? But if you look at the second volume of the Open Society and its enemies, okay, Popper himself creates walls to protect Darwin, Marx as well as Freud. Okay? That is not a part of this course right now, but this one is very important. I mean, a statement however plausible and perfectly consistent with what we observe is not scientific unless we can easily deduce testable consequences from it. In this connection, it is pseudo-scientific. It is also, it is in this connection that Popper attacks Marxism as being pseudo-scientific. Okay? In this sense, when Marx propounded his theory of, for example, when Marx propounded his theory of capitalist society, his theory was a falsifiable theory because it yielded test implications such as disappearances of middle class, revolution in advanced industrial societies and so on. However, according to Popper, these test implications were not borne out and hence the theory was falsified. But the followers of Marx tried to explain the fact that the Marxist predictions did not come about by taking recourse to ad hoc explanations and thus insisted that there was nothing wrong with the theory. In this process, they went on building safety valves for the theory with the result that the theory becomes unfalsifiable, which falls under the purview of being pseudo-scientific. Again, a religious theory about the world is of course also unfalsifiable, but the propounders of religious theories about the world never claim scientificity for their views, whereas Marxists do so vehemently. Religion says that no, the proponents of religion, they suggest that no, we do not believe in science. That is not. We don't claim our world to be scientific. But Marxists vehemently claim that no, our theory is scientific. Hence, Marxist theory is not merely unfalsifiable for Popper and therefore unscientific, but also pseudo-scientific. It is this pretension to be scientific while being unfalsifiable makes the theory pseudo-scientific. Okay? For Popper. Okay? In the first volume of the Open Society and its enemies. In accordance with what Popper considers to be the hallmark of scientific theories, he puts forward the adequate model of scientific method. I mean, what kind of thing that we are getting till now? That if a theory is unfalsifiable, then it is not scientific. A theory must be falsifiable, because we do not tend to create universal theory. That is why for Popper, in accordance with what Popper considers to be the hallmark of scientific theories, he puts forward an adequate model of scientific method. He characterizes his model of scientific method as the hypothetico-deductive model. We call it HD model. Okay. Not high definition model, but hypothetico-deductive model. Okay. Now present generation perhaps looks at high definition, but I am not referring to that. I am referring to Popperian hypothetico-deductive model. And according to Popper, the method of science, okay, is not the method of induction, that from particular instances to arrive at a concrete generalization, but rather the method of science is the method of hypothetico-deduction. Okay. What we say deduction, actually deduction, it always starts with a hypothesis. That is why he said it is a method of hypothetico-deduction. Then what are the fundamental differences between these methodological models? Okay. First, the inductivist model, as we have already discussed, maintains that our observations are theory independent. Also positivists also maintain that our observations are theory independent, and therefore are indubitable. That is to say, since observations are theory independent, they have probability value of 1. That we always start with observation, that is observations are presuppositionless, observations are theory independent. We do not. For it also says, inductivists, positivists, they also say that that whatever theories that we have, they are always winnowed from observations, and therefore, our scientific theories have the initial probability value 1 in principle. Of course, inductivists admitted that in actual practice, theories may contain something more than what observation statements indicate. The result, our actual theories may not have been winnowed from observations. Hence, the need for verification arises. Okay. That is why positivists also argued that the hallmark of scientific theory is lies in their systematic verifiability, which Popper rejects the inductivist view that our observations are theory free. Popper rejects this view that they are theory independent. No, observations are not theory independent, and hence he rejects the idea that our observation statements have probability equal to 1. Okay. For Popper, observations are always theory laden. Observations, no observation, whatever observations that we make, okay, they are not presuppositionless. Okay. And more importantly, what Popper maintains, that theories are not winnowed from observations or facts, but are free creations of human mind. Our scientific ideas, in other words, are not extracted from our observations, they are pure inventions for Popper. Since our theories are our own constructions, not the functions of anything like pure observations, which according to Popper are anyway myths, the initial probability of our scientific theories is 0. Okay? He was quite open. Okay? This is where he deviated from positivists and inductivists. From this, what it follows? From this it follows that whereas according to inductivists, what scientific tests do is to merely find out whether our scientific theories are true. For Popper, on the other hand, scientific tests cannot establish the truth of scientific theories, even when the tests give positive results. If a test gives a positive result, inductivists claim that, or even positivists claim that the scientific theory is established as true, whereas according to Popper, all that we claim is that our theory has not yet been falsified, because we have collected only those data to support our theory. Popper suspects even that the sun always rises in the east. In Popper's schema, no amount of positive result of scientific testing can prove our theories. And that is a different matter whether the sun always rises in the east or not. If you look at the Copernican revolution, earlier Ptolemy said in astronomy before, prior to Copernican revolution in astronomy, that the sun moves and the planets, especially the earth, okay, they remain constant. That is why at that time the powers that be, including the kings and emperors, okay, they used to have this notion called the sun rises in the east, as if the sun moves around the planets. No, rather the planets move around the sun. That is why Copernicus, Galileo, they objected, and they had to face virulent criticisms from the powers that be. But such was the strength of such rejection of the powers that be, that today we can say that this is an erroneous statement that the sun rises in the east. Maybe we will say that no, the horizon sets in the east. That part of the earth which faces towards the sun becomes day, that part of the earth which does not face towards the sun becomes night. That is why the horizon sets in the east, not the sun rises in this. That is a different story altogether, but in this context, in the context of Popper, even if I say that the horizon sets in the east or the sun rises in the east, okay, no amount of positive result, and on a daily basis we witness this, that we will say that no, this is day, this is night, this is how the orbits work, the planets work, sun works, this is how, but for Popper, no amount of repetition, no amount of positive result, no amount of accumulation of observational data of scientific testing can prove our theories. Whereas inductivists speak of confirmation of our theories in the face of positive results of the test, Popper only speaks of corroboration. In other words, in the inductivist scheme, we can speak of scientific theories as established truths, whereas in the Popperian schema, a scientific theory, however well supported by evidence, remains permanently tentative. We can bring out the fundamental difference between verificationism propounded by inductivism as well as positivism, as well as and on the one hand, and falsificationism propounded by hypothetico-deductivism on the other, by drawing on the analogy between the two systems of criminal law, okay, between two systems of criminal law.